It happened quietly at first, like a whisper carried across the damp Manchester air. Something elusive, something improbable, a headline dismissed by some as wishful thinking. But for millions of Manchester United fans worldwide, it was a whisper that grew into a roar, a movement, a final revolt against years of decay and disillusionment. For 2025 was not just another year in the club's turbulent modern era. It was the year when everything changed. The year when the old order finally broke, and the Qatari takeover of Manchester United became real, not a fantasy, not a tabloid rumor, but a definitive break from a past marred by Glazer neglect, leveraged debt, broken promises, and a stadium that crumbled both literally and symbolically under the weight of nostalgia. And what made it all the more breathtaking was how long it took to get here, how the story began years prior, in 2022 and 2023, when Sheikh Jassim bin Hamad Al Thani, son of Qatar's former prime minister, a man with nearly limitless wealth backed by the Gulf state's sovereign ecosystem, launched a bold all-cash bid to buy 100% of the club, a full takeover that would have erased nearly $1 billion in debt and poured billions more into Old Trafford, Carrington, youth development, and the first team, a bid that was clean, decisive, and to many fans, the only legitimate way to exercise the Glazer era. But as always with Manchester United, nothing was simple. And in those years, the Glazers, true to form, dragged their feet, clung to power, split votes within the family, and eventually leaned toward a more complex, half and half out arrangement with Ineos owner Sir Jim Ratcliffe, the British billionaire who offered to buy a minority stake with long-term plans to increase control over footballing operations, a move that infuriated many in the fan base who saw it as yet another stall, another business, first maneuver that kept the Glazers enriched and United entrapped. But the real twist came in 2024, when that Ineos deal, initially celebrated by some as a compromise solution, began to unravel under the weight of contradictions, delays, internal power struggles, and legal complications. And while Sir Jim's sporting vision was noble in intent, the financial structure was messy, the timeline uncertain, and his influence limited without full control. And that's when the Qatari team returned, not in desperation, but with cold, clinical timing, armed with the financial firepower of a nation-state and a new urgency to match the evolving ambitions of Saudi-backed Newcastle, UAE-owned Manchester City, and American-led Chelsea. And while fans had grown cynical after years of failed bids, hollow promises, and strategic reviews that never delivered, there was something different this time. Whispers emerged from London bankers, private briefings in Doha hinted at movement, and by February 2025, the wheels were in motion again. Only this time, it was not just Sheikh Jassim, but a more consolidated front led by the Qatar Investment Authority, QIA, the $500 billion sovereign wealth fund, coordinating with 9-2 Foundation and international law firms to re-engage the Glazers with a new offer, this one even more aggressive than before. $7.2 billion for a full buyout, an immediate assumption of debt, plus a long-term redevelopment fund for Old Trafford exceeding $2 billion. And unlike in 2023, this time the Glazer family was fractured to the point of surrender, with Joel and Avram isolated, worn down by fan protests, poor sporting results, and mounting pressure from institutional investors like Elliott Management and Sixth Street Partners who wanted a clean exit. And so, after months of intense private negotiation, regulatory clearance from the Premier League's owners and directors test, and a flurry of backroom diplomacy involving legal firms, UK politicians, and even intermediaries linked to UEFA, the announcement dropped like a bombshell in April 2025. Manchester United had been sold in full to a Qatari consortium with Sheikh Jassim named honorary chairman and the 9-2 Foundation assuming complete control of the club, a seismic moment, not just for the Premier League, but for global sport, as one of the last great privately owned European clubs had been absorbed into the growing empire of state-influenced superclubs, and reactions poured in, some jubilant, some furious, all intense. As the fan base erupted with a mix of hope and unease, for while many welcomed the end of the Glazer era with uncontainable joy, others questioned the morality of state ownership, the geopolitical baggage of Gulf investment, and the implications for competitive integrity. But inside Old Trafford, the mood was electric. triumphant even with spontaneous fan marches, murals of Sheikh Jassim unfurled outside the stadium, and chants of, "We've got our club back," echoing through the city like a war cry. And as the dust settled, the Qatari era began not with hesitation, but with immediate action. Richard Arnold stepped down, a new CEO was appointed with direct ties to Paris Saint-Germain's financial team. A sporting director from Bayern Munich was recruited, and Eric Ten Hag, who had narrowly survived years of boardroom chaos, was offered a long-term extension and a war chest the likes of which United hadn't seen in decades. And by June 2025, the first transfer rumors under the new regime had already stunned Europe. Bids for Jude Bellingham, Victor Osimhen, and even a possible hijack of Kylian Mbappe's Real Madrid move began circulating. Not as fan fiction, but as real options under a regime that didn't see financial ceilings. And as training ground footage leaked of Carrington's rapid redevelopment, including AI-assisted medical centers, data-driven performance labs, and luxury player lodges, it became clear this wasn't just a new owner. This was a systemic overhaul, a top-down reinvention of what Manchester United represented. And yet, even amid the excitement, controversies brewed. Human rights organizations raised red flags. Rival clubs and journalists questioned UEFA's willingness to let another Gulf-owned team compete freely. And within the United fan base, debates turned personal. Was this sports washing or salvation? Were fans now complicit in something bigger than football? Could trophies ever fully cleanse the political complexities of ownership tied to autocratic regimes? But for many fans who had lived through the darkest decade in United's modern history, those questions, while valid, were drowned out by the emotional release of finally feeling like they mattered again. Like the club was no longer a decaying ATM for absentee landlords in Florida, and more importantly, like winning, truly, unapologetically winning, was back on the table, and with a new era dawning, the 2025-26 season loomed with the promise of revolution, not evolution, as stadium renders were released, showing a 90,000-seat modern fortress with retractable roofing and digital fan integration zones, while kit sponsors from the Middle East and Asia flooded in, eclipsing even the biggest Adidas and TeamViewer deals of the past, and youth academy investments skyrocketed with full scholarships for underprivileged players from Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. And as the Premier League braced for another wave of state-funded dominance, the question wasn't whether Manchester United would return to the top, but how fast, how forcefully, and whether anyone could stop them. And in this new age of financial warfare, soft power diplomacy, and global branding, Manchester United wasn't just a football club anymore. It was a geopolitical asset, a weapon of cultural prestige, and a phoenix reborn under the golden sun of the Middle East, promising both glory and complexity, dominance and debate. And as the team stepped onto the pitch for their first friendly under Qatari ownership with a new crest, a new anthem, and a squad that looked like a FIFA Ultimate Team dream, one thing became crystal clear. The theater of dreams had never been more alive, more uncertain, or more powerful. And the world was watching.